And the first is House File 1879 from Representative Lippert. Representative Lippert, would you like to move your bill?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that House File 1879 be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill.
Representative Lippert moves that House File 1879 be laid over, and I understand that you have an author's amendment.
I do. I move the A1 amendment, and this amendment deletes Section 2 of the bill. MPCA didn't feel this section was necessary, and others agreed to remove it as well.
Representative Lippert moves the A1. Any discussion to the A1? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The A1 is adopted. Representative Lippert, please tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. This bill seeks to take advantage of the opportunity for solar on closed landfills in Minnesota. According to a feasibility study by the Environmental Quality Board, there are currently 110 landfills in a closed landfill program in the state. There's the potential to install 950 megawatts of solar on 4,500 acres, enough solar energy to power 100,000 homes. The challenge is that unretired general obligation bonds are connected to half of the closed landfill sites. Federal and state law prohibit the use of sites with unpaid bonds for private purposes. This bill then sets up a pilot project to use $3 million in RDA funds to pay off general obligation bonds connected to the Ramsey and Anoka closed landfill. The bill also calls for a report to be completed that would include challenges or barriers faced during development and after the completion of the project, and replicability of the project to other closed landfill sites. My first testifier today is David Schaefer.
Mr. Schaefer, welcome to the committee.
Hi. Chair Long and members of the Climate and Energy Finance and Policy Committee, I am David Schaefer, Executive Director of MNCEA. I want to thank you all for hearing House File 1879 and specifically thank Representative Lippert for bringing this bipartisan bill forward. Bright fields, or the concept of putting solar on closed landfills, really started to generate some momentum 2 years ago with the first Bright Fields bill that resulted in a study published in 2020. House File 1879 was put together collaboratively with several cities, nonprofits, state agencies, and other organizations that care passionately about Bright Fields deployment. It largely adopts the findings of the study. The bill generally does two things to move Bright Fields forward in Minnesota. First, it enables the Pollution Control Agency to regulate the reuse and redevelopment of these sites to make sure that the potential environmental challenges of building on or near a landfill cap are sufficiently monitored by the state. This expands our state's available space for economic development while keeping our citizens safe. This bill also addresses a regulatory hurdle that has precluded Bright Fields development. The study determined that about half of the closed landfills in Minnesota have general obligation bonds on them. The rules around those bonds preclude economic activity on these sites for the duration of the bond, which can be as long as 37.5 years. It's unclear as to how the bonds can be paid down or removed, but it does seem likely that the state can pay off the bond using renewable development account dollars or other state appropriated funds. Conexus Energy, who is here today, the largest electric cooperative in the state, wants to do a solar project on a closed landfill. This project is really a pilot, hopefully the first of many Bright Fields here in Minnesota. This pilot would give us an opportunity to see if MMB is able to release the funds to allow for the development of a Bright Fields project. And then if for some reason MMB is unable to waive the bond obligation, they will need to report back on what the obstacles are so you all can make legislative changes accordingly. If the funding can go forward, then Conexus will get to build its project, and they will report back to the legislature with MMB and PCA on how the project went, and if using state or RDA dollars to pay off bonds when projects like this one emerge is a viable pathway forward for getting more solar on closed landfills. One of the benefits of using RDA dollars for a project like this is that it is an account designed exactly for this type of project. It's money set aside for renewable energy projects. Additionally, this RDA payment would pay down a bond and would not go to Conexus directly, thus saving taxpayers money. I do acknowledge that this is an expenditure on a project that's outside of Xcel service territory, but this project not only will help taxpayers, who are often Xcel ratepayers, but will also make a template that many closed landfill projects can use that are within Xcel service territory. I think they have about 17 of them in total. The knowledge of how to replicate these projects is something that will eventually benefit all ratepayers in Minnesota. And if Xcel wants to move forward with similar projects, we will be there to assist them with those efforts as well. In closing, House File 1879 makes too much sense for Minnesota not to do. It takes an emerging technology and puts it in spots that make the most sense. If we can figure out how to make Brightfields work by reducing regulatory barriers, then everybody wins. With that, I ask for this bill to be laid over and considered in this year's Energy Omnibus Bill. Thank you all for considering this bill. Thank you again to Representative Lippert for carrying it, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Representative Lippert, I believe you have one more testifier.
I do, Mr. Chair. That's correct. Brian Brandt is here to testify from Connexus as well.
Mr. Brandt, welcome to the committee.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Brian Brandt, Vice President of Power Supply and Business Development at Connexus Energy. We are a member-owned distribution cooperative serving 138,000 members in 1,000 square miles of the North Metro. Our service area includes portions of 7 counties, which includes the state districts of 12 senators and 20 representatives. 2 of the esteemed members of this committee have districts that overlap with the Connexus service area. These are districts 15B and 36A. Our residential and commercial business members seek reliable, safe, and affordable electricity. Our democratically elected business board of directors and progressive management have endeavored and kept our rates flat for 4 consecutive years. And in 2021, we reduced our rates for business accounts by 2%. Many efforts contribute to our record, including Minnesota state leadership advancing environmental sustainability, new resources like wind, solar, and battery storage. Connexus has 20 megawatts of solar and 15 megawatts of battery storage. We are currently looking for sites to add more solar. That is why this bill is of interest to Connexus. This morning, I wholeheartedly speak in favor of House File 1879, Brightfields 2.0, solar at closed landfills. This act builds upon the 2019 appropriation of funds to the Environmental Quality Board to study the feasibility of solar development on state-managed closed landfills. We thank you for funding this study. It identified 110 closed state-permitted landfills spread throughout the state. Half these sites have restrictions, just like the closed Anoka-Ramsey landfill, because of past general obligation financing. We identified the Anoka-Ramsey landfill back in 2016 as a potential location for solar and began working with the MPCA. However, after a period of several months, we had to shelve this site after learning about the restrictions related to the general obligation bonds. The closed Anoka-Ramsey landfill could be the first Brightfields example where a utility partners with the state to develop solar, providing land lease revenue to the state and local renewable generation. If House File 1879 is approved, Connexus will commit to working with the state and developing an approximate 30-acre solar project on the skirt land surrounding the closed Anoka-Ramsey landfill. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This concludes my testimony.
Thank you so much. We have 2 individuals who've signed up for public testimony. First, we'll hear from Kirk Kadelka with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Kirk Kadelka. I'm Assistant Commissioner with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and work on land policy issues. First off, I want to thank the Chair and supporters of the bill for the amendment, removing Section 2. It does address many of our concerns that we've outlined in previous testimony and some unintended consequences that were caused by it. So we do appreciate that. So what I'd like to do today, just briefly, is leave a couple questions for the committee and others to look at as we start having further conversations about the closed landfill sites in our closed landfill program and how they may be used for energy or other types of reuse projects. We're going to refrain and defer to the Department of Commerce and others on the questions of what is the appropriate funding source for it or sites. But there are some things as we look to use potentially other revenue sources for these types of projects where there are lease revenues. Questions about where those lease revenues should go to. Currently, they would go to the remediation fund, which would fund further cleanup of our 110 contaminated sites. However, since they are from energy projects, the question is this an opportunity to create a revolving program which would help pay off the next set of landfills and bond pieces. So that's one thing I think that we should have some more conversations on. And then 2, just long-term, if this bill really is about a pilot project to start off one specific location, or if this is meant to be a build out a more robust program for the closed landfill program, we'd like to have continued conversations with the legislature and others about what that would look like and how to balance the needs of the primary mission of the program, which is protecting human health and the environment from these sites, but also advance reuse and brownfield development. Thank you, representatives.
Thank you. And next we will hear from Rick Evans with Excel Energy. Mr. Evans.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you. Excuse me, I'm Rick Evans with Xcel Energy. The RDA and its predecessor, the RDF, were created out of legislation passed in 1994. At that time, renewable energy was a small industry struggling to compete. The fund, which is collected exclusively from Xcel Energy customers, was a modest effort to direct resources to help this industry get up and running and to promote innovation in the application of renewable energy. Now, almost 30 years later, renewable energy is a thriving industry and increasingly competitive in the marketplace. Yet Xcel Energy customers continue to pay tens of millions of dollars a year into the account through their energy bills. Over that period, the fund has been applied to many uses, including some only remotely connected to its original purpose. House File 1879 sets a new precedent for the RDA expenditures, using money collected exclusively from Xcel Energy customers to retire the debt incurred by a political subdivision. Essentially, Xcel Energy customers are being required to pay off someone else's mortgage. The connection to actual renewable energy is one step removed from this expenditure. By paying off the debts of others, Xcel Energy customers are asked to facilitate a solar development by another utility, not Xcel Energy, one whose customers make no contribution to the RDA and who, in fact, would actively resist any attempts to have them contribute to the RDA. As this discussion moves forward, we would ask the committee, particularly those who represent Xcel Energy customers, whether this proposed use of the RDA is the direction that we should go. We would suggest that it is not. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll turn to any member questions if there are any. I'm not seeing hands. Representative Lippert, would you care to make some closing comments to your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the committee's time and the time of testifiers today. I've certainly opened a conversation about other state finances for this project, but do think that the point Mr. Schaefer made was important too, that there are 17 closed landfill sites within Xcel territory, and if this could help find a pathway for that, that does seem to be a good argument for RDA usage, but open to more conversation about that going forward. So I thank everyone for the time.
Thank you so much, Representative Lippert. Representative Lippert renews his motion and House File 1879 is laid over.